Hi, I'm Brian Yuzna, and you are listening to Movie Raid.
It's time for the Movie Raid. Tonight's victim is writer-producer Brian Yuzna, who has done many films such as Re-Animator, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Society, Dentist 2, lots and lots of others. Hello.
Hi.
We got any projects that we're working right now that we have yet to discover from you?
Well, there's always projects, but until they're ready to be released, they really don't exist, do they? Well, I've been working with producer David Searing on a series based on the old Blood Island movies that were shot in the Philippines back in the early 60s, real cheap exploitation kind of tiki horror. We put out a comic book, Tales of Blood Island, which is sort of a quarter of the script, and the second one is going to be going up on Kickstarter, I think, in a few weeks.
Do you think studios have been creating films, today's modern society and filmmaking, purely for stylizing than its content?
Well, I think the style is part of the content. I think not just studios, but anybody who is trying to make a business out of making movies or TV or audiovisual entertainment, I think their first goal is to not lose any money. And that has great repercussions. So expensive to make mainstream movies now. And the streamers are making movies for cheaper, but you get them for free. You don't have to pay to go see them. You just get it on Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu or whatever the streamer is. There's a whole other level of the movies, which is sort of the grassroots part of it. What's really always sustained the movie business in the modern era has been people trying to get into the movie and just kind of borrowing or stealing a little bit of money and then trying to make a movie. And they often aren't so much trying to get their money back, although their investors may think they are. But a lot of times what they're more interested in is having a movie that they can use as kind of a calling card that can show that they're worth hiring by the people making the bigger movies.
Do you feel like you're in that same boat in a way still, even there's a lot of advancement and everything? Like, do you feel like you're secured, or do you also kind of worry on some of this as well, because it's all about streaming and all this stuff? But I mean, this is the main filmmaking now to get movies and all that stuff. But does it help you, or does it put you on almost in an imbalance of your work?
Well, I'm old now, so nobody really wants to have me make a movie anyway, unless I create the deal. But on the other hand, nobody ever did. So when I started, I just raised the money and made a movie, and luckily it was a good one, and I was able to continue making movies because I had kind of a track record. I came up in the video era of the 80s and into the 90s when that started dying. In the 2000s, I moved to Europe and then to Indonesia for a dozen years and made movies over there. But slowly throughout the 90s and accelerating into the 2000s, internet bandwidth got so big it could stream movies easily, and the video business, the physical video business, collapsed. That did create a problem for independents, for people trying to get in. It's never been easy to make money making movies, and most people that are trying to get in really just want somebody to hire. They want someone to hire them to make the new Avengers movie or hire them to make whatever script they have in mind to make. It's very hard to get someone to put up money for your project. It's a real long shot, and it's an even longer shot for a big production company to hire you. I don't think it's ever been easy. Maybe it was a little easier in the 80s because video was booming. You know, there were just so many little companies making money off physical video before the studios came in and before Blockbuster became the Netflix of the 90s. There was a lot of opportunities to make movies and not lose money.
While films are basically becoming infused with the whole streaming and whatnot, as far as the producing and the directing, even today, like as artists go into this, do you think there might actually be almost a fixture in a way as how the methods of the filmmaking and how all these advancements have been attached to this? Or do you think that this is actually helping them in some way to where that they can still make money but not be just almost a prop to just doing that, even though they are hired to do this job?
If you're talking about directing producing, writing, there's very few slots available, and they're the top of the food chain. If you're talking about being a grip or taking over craft services, there's a lot of jobs on a movie set. Even a cheap movie, no budget movie's going to have 40, 50 people, and big movies have hundreds of people working on them. Now, if you're talking about directing, well, it's a long, difficult road. If you're saying, no, I want to be a grip or I want to be an electrician, well, there's a good chance that if you work hard in the indie world and then get into the union, and you could possibly make a living being on the crew. And there's a lot of people that do that, and they will definitely tend to do whatever job they're trained to do. And maybe camera assistant can work his way up to being a focus puller and being an operator, and maybe even starting to be a director of photography. He may be doing it on commercials or music videos or independent movies, and when he's doing a bigger movie, he may be being an operator, camera assistant. A lot of different areas to the movie business. It's not impossible at all to get in. If your idea of getting into it is that you're going to be the director, that's a different story. It takes a whole other game plan and certain kind of talent, luck, and connection.
There are lots of popular franchises, especially that are just circulating all over the place now, especially now, and upcoming films are either shifting, of course, from the streaming and all that services and all that stuff, even get removed, even from popular ones. Do you think the steps between fail and success have gotten more miniature, or do you think it's more on filtering money just based off of for the sake of the title?
You've got to deliver a movie. If you could just sell a title, they wouldn't have shelved that Batgirl movie, right, that they'd already spent $90 million on. There has to be something there that will get the money back depending on your investment. If you are going to make a movie for $20,000 with your friends, well, you can certainly do that, and you're probably not going to lose much money, but I don't think your title's going to make a lot of difference. The movie doesn't deliver. A movie that is a sequel that has a title, say you've got the rights to I'll give you a good example, Return of the Living Dead. Return of the Living Dead that Dan O'Bannon made in the 80s was a kind of alternate sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and then they made a sequel to that called Return of the Living Dead 2, and it kind of didn't live up to the huge success of the first one. I got the job to do the third one, to develop it and produce and direct it. I did that one, and that worked pretty good. They then sold the title to, forget the name of the guy, who made two of them right in a row, parts 4 and 5, and they were unsatisfying that it kind of killed the franchise. So just because they had the sequel name rights, by making a not good movie, well, that kind of killed the value of those sequel rights. I don't think you can sell a movie just based on the title, but I think there were times when you could in the 70s at drive-in theaters, grindhouses. But I think that if you make a sequel, all the sequel name does is it gives recognition. It makes it an intellectual property. It means that people know what it is. If there's a movie coming up on streaming and it's called Texas Chainsaw Massacre 8, or there's one called Texas Killer, it could be the same movie, and you might be more inclined, Texas Chainsaw 8 have an identity. You'll go, oh, it's a sequel. I wonder if they have Leatherface in it. Or that same movie could be Texas Killer, and you'd go, should we watch that? Who directed it? Who wrote it? It's not somebody you know of. Well, you didn't know who directed or wrote Texas Chainsaw 8 either, but that title, it gave you an awareness of it that normally you would have to advertise a movie to get that awareness. Marketing is normally, in studio pictures, marketing costs as much as making the movie. It's a huge cost to get people to be aware of a movie. So that's the value of having sequel names. And they've always done that. I mean, in the 40s, you had The Thin Man, and then you had After the Thin Man, and then you had Return of the Thin Man. There's always been sequels to movies.
And just like back Return of the Living Dead, like Return of the Living Dead, the second of Return of the Living Dead, like he wasn't an actual director, but he was more of a financial advisor for the most part. And a lot of the cast people definitely didn't like the direction of that film, how it was going and so forth. But, it made some money, but like in today's modern technology of everything, it's like they just keep fishing more and more and more off of those titles. Do you think they're just basically surviving only on the fragments of what they're known for rather than to continue to adapt more content for that film, even though these are old methods? But do you think there's such thing as evolving it, or do you think they're just kind of, going so far away from it, they're not appeasing to the audience where they can actually enjoy what it is and what it was when it started?
Well, if an audience doesn't like the movie, they definitely won't go see it. And the people putting up the money are probably generally doing everything they can to get people to, hire people to make the movie that are going to give them the best chance of making money from this movie. That means you have to have an audience. Of a movie is kind of like in the Hustler, the Paul Newman movie, when Jackie Gleason, who played Minnesota Fats, told Paul Newman, he says, you know how we keep score in pool? It's whoever has the most money at the end of the night, that's who wins. And I think that's kind of the way movies are in a way. We do have critics. Everybody has their idea what makes a good movie. But to a movie investor, what makes a good movie is a movie that makes them a lot of money. To make them a lot of money, it means a lot of people have to go see it. I'm not saying that, but there are a little bit shady ways of just taking a ton of money out of a movie's budget and make money, whether it makes money, keeps a lot of the budget. But I'm saying in general, whatever anybody says, a good movie is a movie that a lot of people want to watch. And if a lot of people want to watch it, they end up paying for it either by buying a ticket or by signing up to the streaming service because it has that movie. People sign up to Disney because you get the Star Wars movies, you get the Pixar, all these movies, that of, that you want to see. That's why you pay Disney every month to sign up for their service. I think the people who make money who are trying to earn money off an investment in the movies, as well as the people who are making the movies, have an interest in getting as many people as possible to watch their movie. The people who make it, it's because they don't make a movie just for themselves. They make a movie because they want to have an audience. They want people to see their work and appreciate it. And a big audience kind of indicates success. The studios want to have a big audience. That directly translates into money in so many different ways. I think it's kind of just the way it's always been, except now it's streaming. And is it hard to get in? Yes, of course. Has it ever been easy? No. At least today, anybody can make a movie with their iPhone and some downloaded apps from the internet with Final Cut and Pro Tools, and you can make a movie in your bedroom, in your office. That's never been the case before. It used to be you had to have professionals. You had to have a lab. You had to make a movie, you needed people who really knew the technology of it. Today, you don't have to. As a matter of fact, you can make a movie without anybody professional having anything to do with it. And in some ways, that's one of the problems, that we make movies, people make movies, and they don't have anybody who actually is a professional making sure that it has some coherence to it. The other part that makes it difficult for people to make commercial movies is that there's this thing that film schools have imbued upon all their students, which is that a movie is your personal artistic statement. Everybody feels like they're an artist on their first short film. They kind of want to be the singer-songwriter. They want to write it, direct it, shoot it, produce it, cut it, because that means that they are the artist. Well, this is unfortunate because it's hard enough just to write a movie or to just direct a movie or to just produce a movie. These are difficult jobs. Folks go into it with this idea that if they don't do every job themselves, that somehow they're not a true artist or a true movie maker. Well, that's unfortunate because that's the kind of thing that makes a movie sort of incoherent and not entertaining.
How do you feel that with these independent artists that are doing almost in a similar fashion in terms of that mentality, like they think they're artists when they get their first movie out, but now there's a lot of them are just like pumping out film after film after film with very low budget, which low budget is not a bad thing, but like these films I've noticed is like they're not like being distributed anywhere, and I still keep seeing more different titles from these artists of that same artist. But do you feel like in some way like that's a huge problem as well?
Well, I mean, if you don't watch the movies and you're not made to watch them and they're just sitting there, I don't know why that's a big problem. People can do whatever they want with their time. If you make a couple of movies and you make your money back on it and maybe even make some money off it, well, then you're a professional movie maker. If you make a movie and you don't make any money on it, well, you do that a number of times, that becomes a hobby. There's a difference between a hobby and a business. In a business, you make money. In a hobby, you don't. You spend money. There are a lot of people who put up the money and they make a movie and they really have no idea about the business. They don't know how to go about kind of making any sales. They may figure out how to get a sales company involved, but they will probably make a deal with that sales company in which they'll lose their movie and not get any money. The whole business of movie is financing and selling. It's not production. It's not the warehouse where you make the product. The business is in financing and then getting your money back. And so that's something that most people, maybe if they're living in LA, you'll just know so many people, you'll at least get some of that cultural rub off on you. But if you don't, it's just another dark woods of trying to figure out what the business is. You kind of have to learn it by doing it, or you have to take good advice.
Now, there's such thing as evolving as an artist and getting their movies and evolving as filmmakers and so forth. But what would you consider as devolving in filmmaking, especially today? What areas do you think is kind of devolving rather than continue to evolving now?
I don't think it's devolving. I think it's changing with technology, changing with the business. I don't think there's some way that movie making should be. When I grew up, we listened to 45 RPM records on a record player with a big, thick center to it, and you'd hear one song on each side. And that's how I originally bought my rock and roll record. Of course, you get the LP, which you could have 10 or 12 songs on it, and the quality's better, but you're still on a turntable. When CDs came in, everything went over to CDs. It was an easier format. And then, of course, there were tape decks, and now it's streaming. Well, some people think that it still should be LPs. I never thought that because 45 RPM records quit being commercially viable, that somehow the record industry was devolving. I just felt like, well, that's just another delivery system. Movies are going backwards. I don't think so. Just it's changing by the technology. They're becoming very digital. We don't use film anymore. We don't cut on film anymore. The way cutting was done on most of the movies I did, the editor knew that a piece of film is, if he pulled open a piece of film with his two hands, and it would be about, 2.5 feet. He knew how long a piece of film played, and he cut almost as much from that as anything. Well, with digital, you just click, 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 click. Cutting can do 3 cuts in a second. Because of digital, you just let the camera run. It costs nothing to shoot. Well, most of the movies I made, we had to be careful when we turned on the camera. You couldn't afford to just shoot a bunch of film, keep it running. And now you just keep it running and then have a lot of footage to cut around. One thing that I think digital has affected, and I don't know if this is devolving or if there's always been, I think in one way you could say it is, but in another not. And that is that when you make a movie, if you are using film and the cameras are pretty big, it used to be hard to shoot on practical locations because the rooms that you would shoot in had low ceilings, like 8 or 9 feet ceilings, so you couldn't put lights up there. If you put lights above the actors, they would be in the shot, and you couldn't move the camera back far enough to get far away from the actors because there's a wall there. So shooting in practical locations was really a trick, and you needed a lot of light exposed the 35 millimeter film. So this meant that we did a lot of stuff on stage, and on stage you basically go into a big dark hall, and then if you want to have any walls, you have to build them and put them up there. So you have to build your set. Then you got to bring in every bit of furniture or whatever set dressing you have, and then you have to bring in lights to light up the set and light up the actors, and so then you have to figure out where to put the lights. And so you have to put in one light to fill in the whole set. Then you do a key light on the actor, and then you do a backlight or a ridge light. And so lighting is a whole bunch of series of decisions about how you're going to light that set. Everything about the set has been designed and built. When you go on location, a lot of times you just shoot what's there. And now with digital, you don't need a lot of lights. Cameras are real small. You can just shoot in your house without bringing in any other light. What happens then is that the only way to give a style or to give a point of view to the photography is with your framing or your camera movement. This is totally different from having to build the lighting and the set from the ground up. Is that devolving? I don't know. In a way it is, and in some ways, one of the things that I think people like about 80s movies is because there was this sort of, kind of everything, not everything, because you still shot on location and all that, but there was more decisions to be made about every part of the movie, what it looked like. And so there's sort of a point of view there. And now there's not as much, except unless the director, the producer, the DP, unless they decide that they understand that and they're going to make a point of view of lighting, a style of lighting that they want for the movie. Was it better when everybody was forced to do that? Probably not, because back in those days, yes, you did build your set, but on cheap movies, generally you would rent them. You rent the set dressing and you can rent the flats. And if you're going into a place where you can rent studio space often, and they still have this, there's already standing sets there. There'll be a courtroom set. There'll be a jail set. There'll be an office. There'll be an apartment. Now, they'll be really stripped down because the last person that was there painted it green. Well, now you go paint it whatever color you want. You rent the furniture you want. Back in the day where you had to build your set, a lot of movies just did the minimum. I think most movies today do the minimum, and people who are trying to get into it don't have a lot of experience. They're just struggling to just get through a movie. You've got to be on movie sets and be involved with making movies to understand the pieces that are in play. And you don't do it just by doing YouTube tutorials. It's a very complicated thing, and it's not easy, but I don't think it's going backwards. I think it's just becoming more digital. One of the things about getting into the movie business is you're probably going to get taken advantage of just out of your own ignorance. I've pretty much gotten involved with most of the sides of making movies. And one thing that I do with a friend of mine, John Penny, we have a little ad hoc company called Dark Arts, and we help people who are making these no budget movies and are going to do what you said before. They're just going to keep making them, even though they're not kind of good enough they're not commercial enough to be able to get some money back. And so what we do is we become the producer's rep, and we give them advice about their next one. And then we also will find the sales agent and make the deals for them to sign, of course, and try to help them get distribution and make contracts that aren't onerous to them. That's one thing that you can do, as I said, if you're going to put the kind of energy, even if it's not a lot of money in terms of movies, it might be a lot of money to you. Just because something's cheap doesn't mean that it has to be worse than something that's expensive. So, for example, I can look at a Michelangelo painting and be awestruck by it, but I can also look at a Michelangelo drawing, a charcoal drawing, and be awestruck. So if you look at your cheap little movie as a sketch, as a drawing rather than a painting, well, it can be a great drawing. And that's kind of what you're going for. And if you don't put much money into it, well, then you don't have to recoup that much money. But like I said, the problem is everybody wants to do everything, and they feel like if they don't know how to do something, that somehow exposes them as being weak or something, or not enough of an artist. I think that's the killer. People who don't look to take advice, because movie making is not easy. Even harder is being in the movie business, which means make movies that will get your money back.
And there you have it, everybody. That is writer-producer Brian Yuzna.
Okay, thanks a lot. It was fun being on the show.